We're thrilled that you are able to join us in this wonderful session with her. My name is Christine Peterson. I am the Johnson County Bilingual Librarian for Latino Services, and I wanted to just go through some housekeeping items with you this evening as we begin this session, this presentation. First of all, I want you to know that we have facilitators this evening, myself, Christine Peterson, and Miss Tammy Thomas. She will be speaking in a small bit. And Thomas is taking care of the questions in the chat, and he is our moderator for this evening. So welcome to Thomas. Also, Mike Keller is our person who will be working on the technical side. So any technical problems you might have, you can go ahead and he'll be aware of that. Use the chat for your questions, and Thomas is going to track those as you put them in for later on in our program for the question and answer session. Remain muted as Julie does her presentation, so throughout the entire program, just remain muted so there's no distractions for any of us. We get every little tidbit that Julie has to share with us. And so without further ado, I am going to turn this mic over to my colleague Tammy, and she's going to give you the marvelous introduction to our author for this evening. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Christine. So Julie Bogart is the popular voice of common sense and compassion in the homeschool community. She's the creator of the innovative writing program called Brave Writer and the popular fast-growing practice called Poetry Tea Time. She's the founder of a homeschool coaching community called the Brave Learner Home. She home educated her 5 children for 17 years, who are now globe-trotting adults. Julie draws from her work with over 100,000 homeschool families over the last 20 plus years and her own homeschool journey to enrich the homeschool and parenting experience. Her writing program includes award-winning online writing classes and paradigm-shifting writing manuals that allow parents and kids to become allies in the writing process. Julie is also author of the best-selling book, The Brave Learner, and host of the popular podcast, The Brave Writer. She enjoys raising African violets and playing with her brand new granddaughter. Julie lives in Cincinnati, Ohio. Welcome, Julie. Thank you for joining us this evening. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so you can take over.
Awesome. Wow. Thank you for that lovely introduction. And hello, everyone. It is fabulous to meet all of you. I will not be able to see the chat once the conversation starts. But if you have any questions, I'm sticking around to answer them. So make sure you put them in the chat. Someone is going to be taking notes in a Word document, Google document, and at the end, I'll be happy to facilitate the answers to those questions. Thank you for this wonderful invitation. I've been really looking forward to it. As you can see, I have a huge banner behind me with my book on it. Not because I need you to know about it. I know you've already got my book, but because it blocks my printer and the messy part of my room. So thank you for being here and hanging out with me. I'm going to give you just a brief background on who I am and my sort of experience of writing and homeschooling so that those of you who are new have a sense of where I come from. So I grew up in Southern California, in Los Angeles area, and my mother is a professional author. She has written over 70 books for publication. That's right, over 70. She is the woman who modeled to me sort of this gentle, natural approach to writing. And I grew up with walls of books about writing that I would read. And these were designed for professionals, people who wanted to get paid for writing. Fast forward a number of years, I started having children. I got interested in home education and discovered, to my shock, that the writing materials, the writing programs available to homeschooling families did not capitalize on all the wisdom that professional writers already have and that they use to help people get published. And I discovered quickly when invited by a friend to talk about writing at a meeting for homeschoolers, I discovered that what I had learned over my lifetime about writing was not available to home educators. At that point, I was working as a ghostwriter, a freelance writer, and a magazine editor. So I was well ensconced in the professional writing field. And I was working with adult non-writers, helping them get into publication. And it was those sort of experiences and that background that really enabled me to think about what are the key qualities that a child needs to be successful in writing. Here's what's interesting. As I homeschooled my kids and as I started working with families who were interested in learning more about writing, what I actually discovered is the principles that lead writers to be successful are actually just really great principles for learning in general. And I expanded my research and grew my understanding of this sort of experience-rich pedagogy, one that capitalizes on an intimate relationship with your kids, one that really understands how the brain works and how learning becomes encoded inside a human being. So as I developed those ideas and did more research, I had the opportunity to write a book. And then, of course, that's what The Brave Learner is all about. I have 5 adult kids. They live all over the place. I have a daughter who is bilingual, listening to you all talk about bilingual library services. She lives in Mexico with her husband. I have a son who speaks Thai. He lives in Bangkok as a human rights lawyer. I have another son who is my favorite because he gave me a granddaughter who lives locally. And then I have a son in Denver and a daughter in California. And they're all fully grown, homeschooled kids who went to college, are gainfully employed. So just a little vouching for this, sort of risky, daring adventure. If you are a homeschooler, it can work. So I simply wanted you to know that and feel secure in this conversation. So before I start, if you are a homeschooling parent who's interested in homeschooling, but you've never done it before, put yes inside the chat. I just want to get a sense of how many of you are brand new to homeschooling. Just put a little yes in the chat. I'm going to wait a minute. Whoa. Okay, there's a couple. I see them starting to come. Okay, thank you. Welcome. Congratulations on making this decision. Oh my goodness, even a public school teacher. You have the most unlearning to do, and that's okay. You will bring all those amazing skills you've learned back into gear once you unlearn a few things. Virtual school, now homeschool, wonderful, wonderful. Okay, how many of you now, the next thing I want you to write is, if you are a homeschooler, how many years have you been doing it? So go ahead and just put a number inside the chat. I just want to know who my audience is. 1, 1.5, 6, 4, 3, 2, first year. 12 years. Good job, Anise. Wow. Oh, this is looking great. Good. So we've got people who are anywhere from sort of 1 or 2 years all the way up to 12, and many with 3 or 4. That is perfect. And then the last category, oh, there's a 10. Fabulous. Is anyone here who is public schooling or private schooling using a traditional school experience? And if you are, just put school in the chat so that I can get a sense of if there are any parents who have kids in school. Okay, Neha, thank you. Deanna, welcome. Awesome. I want you all to know, yes, some have 1 in public school, 1 in homeschool. Some have public virtual school. 1 in public, 1 homeschooled for 5 years. Just starting this year. Okay, so let's get something off our chest right off the bat. I have absolutely no problem with any kind of educational model. I am going to talk about some of the pedagogical constraints of school versus homeschool in this talk, but that is not to be construed as any kind of denigration of traditional education. In fact, of my 5 children, 1 of them did entirely all the way through public high school, and the other 4 each had a part-time experience in public high school. So I want you to know that I don't have a problem with school. What we do want to do is actually analyze and understand what school does well, what home does well, and what a parent who participates in their child's education can do for that child's learning experience, no matter what educational option you select. So feel free to participate. Don't be nervous that I'm going to bash the school choice that you've made. We are here to learn about learning, no matter what kind of school environment you are choosing for your kids. I will, however, focus on home because all of you live with your children, and whether they are home 24 hours a day or afternoons and weekends, you get to spend a lot of time with them. And I want you to take an active role in their learning experience. Okay, great to be here. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to get started. All righty. Can everyone see that okay? I no longer can see chat, so it's silly that I asked that question, but I will assume that if it's hard to see, someone will let me know. Welcome to the Brave Learner. I'm Julie Bogart, as it said. So let's start out with a quiz, little pop quiz. And I want you to tell me, oops, here we go. Whoa, I'm sorry, my keyboard not working there. I want you to tell me which is which. Which of these two buildings is a school? And I'd like you to put either A or B in the chat. Just look at these two buildings and see if you are sophisticated enough to figure out which one is a school. My hunch is that some of you are looking at these two buildings and you're thinking a tricky thought. So before we get to that thought, I'm now going to ask you a different question. Which one of these buildings is a home? Put a B or an A. Is it letter A with the brick building and it has the word school on the front? Or is it the blue house that you're looking at, which is literally where I am sitting right now? Yeah, the word house. B is a home, A is a school. But how many of you, when I said which one is a school, thought that maybe the letter B could also be a school? Did some of you get tricksy on me and think, well, B can be a school because of homeschool? Aha! I'm going to double trick you now. This is a double trick. Yes, the building on the right is officially a school. Yes, the building on the left, the building on the left, the A letter building is officially a school. The building on the right, letter B, is officially a home. And I want to say this to you. It is never a school. It is never a school. Yes, we homeschool, and that could give you the impression that that home building could be a school. But what we're going to talk about today is how important it is for school to be a school and home to be a home where learning can take place, but not where it replicates the conditions of school. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Let's start by breaking down the properties of what a school is. And my hunch is most of you here today have been to school. Maybe you went to public or private school or a charter school. Maybe some of you even went to boarding school. If you homeschooled and if you were homeschooled, you may not have this same experience. But my guess is if you've watched enough Disney Channel, you know what a school is like. First of all, there's a bell schedule. So when you start the day, you don't just get to wake up when you want and start learning because you got enough sleep. The day starts at 7 or 8 or 8:30 every day, and you're expected to show up on time and be ready to learn. Not only that, in junior high and high school, they even divide up what you're learning into segments called periods. And each of those bells, those periods, are divided into subjects. So you might have English, math, and there is literally a bell that rings when that learning period is over, and you're supposed to unhook from what you are learning and re-up for a different subject. That's the bell schedule. It is not okay for you to show up late or to say this isn't a good day for math or to decide that you would like to skip the day because you stayed up late playing video games. You will follow the bell schedule. That is one of the properties of school. Secondly, the teacher is in charge. And we know this because the teacher stands in front of the room and stays in the same room all day. Children come and go. They go out for recess. They go out for lunch. They might go to a music class. They might switch teachers all day if they're in high school or junior high. The teacher is the person who has the authority. You sit frequently in a stiff desk or chair. Now, today, so many cool classrooms have couches, they have chairs with wheels on them. Everything that they are doing in school is to do what? Approximate the comfort of home. But even so, there's still a teacher in charge deciding when you can go sit in the couch or whether or not you're allowed to roll the chair. So even when school tries to be more homey, it still has a structure that is suited to the building. Learning and breaks are allocated. Behavior is controlled. Your kids are told to put away their cell phones and turn them off. They can't chew gum. They're not allowed to get up in the middle of class and walk over and tell their friends something that they think is funny. They cannot just interrupt the teacher while she's speaking and ask for a snack. The behavior conforms to a system where there's a person in charge and 20 to 30 kids that need to be moved through a certain amount of material at a certain pace. That's why school is designed the way that it is. The academic assessment is always by the instructor. So it's rare that a student could say to a teacher, you know, I gave it my best effort. I think I deserve an A. That's pretty much not how school measures a student's growth. They measure it against a standard or all the right answers or against other kids. That doesn't happen in the same way at home. So academic assessment is made by an adult, not by the child. And the evaluation that happens in school is of finished products. For instance, back when I was in 4th grade, I did a report on, I think it was Catherine the Great. And I was really excited to do this report. So I went and I studied the World Book Encyclopedia. And then I got a blank sheet of white construction paper without any lines. And I hand wrote my report, which was about 5 sentences long. And then I 3-hole punched it and put it inside a red folder that held it together, a little report folder. And I decorated the cover. And I turned it in thinking this would entertain my teacher, that it would be a real treat for her to get a report inside a folder in handwriting on blank white paper. Now, I was in 4th grade, so you can imagine the slopiness and the lack of organization of my handwriting on blank paper. I got a C for not following instructions. She was not seeing how devoted to this project I was. She did not see me spending hours in the World Book Encyclopedia. She did not hear my imagined joy, thinking that I was giving her a treat. I was evaluated based on her criteria of a finished product. And that is how school is organized. And in fact, you even need a hall pass to pee, right? You can't just leave the class. You got to get permission. You got to find your moment. And honestly, for girls or people who menstruate, that can be a problem in high school. That can actually be an obstacle. So let's compare school now to the properties of home. So we really get a sense of how different these two spaces are. And let me say again, school is designed the way it is because it is as effective as it can be under the conditions that it is given. 1 teacher, 20 to 30 students. It is an effective mode of education. Look at the world we inhabit. Billions of people are being educated that way. But homeschoolers sort of pivot. They've started to deconstruct what it means to learn. And the question a home educator often asks is there a way to learn that's more engaging, more child-centered, more tailored to the kind of learner that my child is? So let's look at the properties of home and see if they give us a clue for how we could learn together more effectively. First of all, you don't have a schedule. Now, I can hear some of the type A parents right now saying, I have a schedule. We're up at 8, we do our chores, we start at 9, we take a break at 10. Okay, but let's be honest. Is the schedule real? I mean, if you got a text message from your spouse saying to you suddenly, hey, I need you to call the bank, pay a bill, come get me at the office because it's burning down. You're going to take that text message, right? You're going to stop the math to look at your phone and do the thing. That's how your kids know you don't have a schedule. It's not real. It's just what you say you want to accomplish. but they know that the toddler is going to break something and you're going to stop to clean it up. The dog is going to want to go outside and you're going to get up and open the door. The baby's going to want to breastfeed and you're going to stop to nurse the baby. You don't have a schedule. What you have is an objective, right? And your objective is to simply move through a certain amount of material, perhaps at a certain rate all day. Home allows you to be yourself. And that means when you get home, you can be exactly who you are. You're not trying to perform. You're not trying to be a student. You're actually just enjoying the opportunity to be the person that you are. I think of it this way. When I'm out in the world, I'm a version of Julie. But when I'm homeschooling, what am I instead? I am actually the Julie that I love being. I'm the Julie who relaxes, who takes off her bra, who kicks off her shoes, right? And that's what your kids feel. We leave our roles outside the home and then we come home to be the person that we feel the most comfortable being. And we put on our soft slippers and our shoes. By the way, if you're just joining us and your video is on, you can turn that off and then you can do whatever you're doing in your home and it won't be on the screen. That's awesome. Thank you. The next thing, you can attend to your personal needs. So if anybody needs to eat a snack, get a drink, change positions, move from the table to the couch, you can do that at home. You can eat and pee whenever you want, right? You're not going to tell your child who needs to use the bathroom that they've got to finish the math page. That doesn't happen at home. The other amazing quality of home is that we observe our children more than we evaluate them. And I really know this is true again with a grandchild. My two kids, my son and his wife, are trained on that child. They observe literally every little bit of activity, every word she states, every slight tweak of a facial expression. And we respond to those. We're able to see when a child's putting in effort versus phoning it in. And we can see sometimes that a really big effort doesn't look good in the finished product, but represents a huge amount of growth. Other times we might notice that a child rips through a worksheet and gets them all right, but we realize it was too easy. That's no longer a good enough challenge. We wouldn't necessarily know that in school. And finally, we're focused on the process, not the product. There is no product. Everything at home is in flux. There's no graduating from 12 to 13. You're just 13 and you get a birthday party. So we are very much attuned to the continuum, not just this year, not just this narrow slice of one subject, but we see the whole 18 years, the whole child, and their development throughout that is bigger than just school subjects. So here's the thing. Home is an ideal place for learning. School is set up to learn according to the needs they have for the way they manage those students. Home gives you a chance to experience a different kind of learning, but it feels so different than school. Sometimes we doubt it. We're not sure it's possible. Now, I had a fantasy when I first started homeschooling. I had heard about all this natural learning and I thought, oh, we'll do it differently than school. And my kids will just wake up and they'll trot down the stairs and grab a math wrap and start doing their times tables while they sit in a beanbag chair looking out a sunny window. Did any of you have like that fantasy that they're just going to run down the stairs? Oh, I can't wait to do math. And then, of course, even if they fulfilled this fantasy for a moment, suddenly the dog starts barking and the baby spills the juice and somebody pulls someone's hair and, it's over in 2 minutes. And so you're left wondering, how do I ensure that my child is actually going to be successful in learning? Do I need to work through the workbook? Is a schedule helpful? Is it important for me to know in advance what they're going to learn and how they're going to learn it? Or can I just trust the child to lead me into all that they need? Will Legos teach them trigonometry by the time they're in 11th grade? This is the question. So first, let's declutter the fantasy around school and homeschool, shall we? First of all, schooling is not fully reliable. I went to 12 years of school before college and still didn't really have a strong grasp of what multiplication was. In fact, I did not understand multiplication until I taught it to my son in 4th grade. No one had explained to me that it was multiples, that it was like adding and a shortcut. I thought I was memorizing sequences. It did not connect for me. I had tutors. I was in a very high quality school district, but somehow I made a misconnection in third grade, and it lasted until I was an adult. Just because you learned history in school doesn't mean you remember it as an adult. How many of you are teaching history to your homeschooled kids right now and you're thinking, I don't remember any of this. History is awesome. I thought it was boring. That is the most common experience of 30 and 40 somethings doing homeschool. Why? Because at the time that they learned history, it was a bunch of disconnected facts for tests. By the time you get a few decades under your belt, you start to understand the impact of the story of history on the world you inhabit, and suddenly you're engaged. So all that to say, schooling is not necessarily as reliable as you might be expecting. But unschooling is also not magical. You do not learn trigonometry from playing with Legos. You may learn a lot of foundational math and spatial mathematics, but that doesn't mean that it is going to teach you all the details of Algebra 2 or calculus. The goal that both spaces share is a love of learning. Enter the enchanted education, what I call pixie dust for learning. How do we make education come to life for our kids? I'd like to invite you to consider Thomas More's definition of what he thinks a childlike education should be. Imagine a form of education that does not try to change the child or transform it into an adult, but rather provides a place where the child can flourish as a child. In other words, we aren't raising adults in training. We want to adjust how our kids learn and how we teach to their age and stage of development. We want to take it for the truth that an 8-year-old should behave like an 8-year-old and learn what an 8-year-old can. Not always think, well, this 8-year-old is preparing to be a 9-year-old who's preparing eventually to be a 13-year-old who will eventually be in college, who will eventually have a mortgage and 5 kids. That isn't how you think about an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old has a year of being 8. How can we transform education into a place where an 8-year-old child can flourish as an 8-year-old child? That's the big question. Let's see here. There we go. The conundrum. A home educator says, I want a happy learner. But what she really means is, I want a cooperative student, right? Am I right? How many times have you thought to yourself, I just wish she was happy learning about math? What you really mean is, I just wish she wouldn't complain about learning math, that she would just cooperate with my agenda. Parents say, I want my child to love learning, but what they really mean is, I want my child to love what I teach. They already love learning. You can't stop a kid from learning how to beat a level on a video game, or how to ride a skateboard, or how to set up the dominoes so that they all fall over correctly, or watching the Great British Bake Off and then trying to do the recipes in your own kitchen. They love learning. But parents think learning looks like school and pain. We expect a little suffering to prove that they're actually learning, and we want our kids to love it. But here's what kids want. Kids say, I want to have fun, which we think means they don't want to learn and they don't want to grow. But what kids mean is, I want to care. Have you ever watched a child do a video game? Some of them practically come to the point where they're punching holes in the wall. They don't look like they're having fun, but oh, do they care? Oh, do they care? And later, they will tell a friend they had a lot of fun. Fun is just the entertainment word for investment. I run marathons. They are not fun, but I care and I call them my fun. Are you hearing what I'm saying? Fun is the thing you care about that gets you amped, that gets your adrenaline going, that makes you feel passionate about living. And our kids have that in spades. The brain research puts it like this. Real learning connotes use. If something isn't going to be learned or immediately used or applied in some manner, it won't get learned. In other words, you can teach the times tables, but if they don't have a meaningful reason for using the times tables, they will just file it over here in a drawer they never open. And then when you go back and check on them 2 months later, they don't have mastery because they've never had to meaningfully use them. If all we do is drill and kill, a phrase that I really hate, what we're saying is there's no meaningful use for this in your life. We just need you to store it so that you pass tests. But the goal of multiplication is to actually do a math shortcut when you need it for something. So the first question to ask ourselves, whether our kids are in school or at home, is, why do they need this? I'm teaching my 4th grader times tables. Where in her life right now are times tables active? How can I tie what she is learning in this rote way to something she values in her real life? And when you can't answer that question, it means you haven't dug deep enough. But I'm going to help you. We're going to do it right now. So before we get there, I want you to look at these 3 pictures. And these are 3 kids doing writing. There's a girl in a pink hat, another girl sitting nicely at a table, and then there is my miserable wretch of a child, Katrin, in the number 3 position. Which one of these girls is doing real writing schoolwork? I'll give you a minute to think about it. Who's doing real writing? It's a trick question. 1, 2, and 3 are all doing real writing. Let's go back and look at them again. Of course, number 1 looks like your dream unschooled child. She's wearing a cool hat, for one thing, in an interesting tire swing with a funky pen, wearing pink Converse tennis shoes, and she's writing. And we all look at that and think, oh, that's the dream. But you know, child number 2 is equally happy. She's absorbed, she's comfortable, she's doing the work that's in front of her, and it is meaningful to her. However, child number 3, my miserable daughter, is not happy. She's not enjoying whatever assignment I must have just given her. They are all doing writing. What matters is not how the activity looks, but how the activity feels. And what I would say is number 1 and 2, equally effective. Number 3, that's the one that needs a fix. We're looking then for an intersection of outcomes. We want our child's happiness for sure, but we also want academic achievement that gets them into college. That's the holy grail of education, whether it's at home or in school. Introducing the magic doors of learning. In my book, The Brave Learner, I talk about something that we call the continent of learning. And what I mean by that is this: every subject under the sun, whether it is piano or video games, whether it is math or music, can be connected to any other subject under the sun. I famously have said, everything can teach anything, and anything can teach everything. Mark that down. Everything can teach anything, and anything can teach everything. So imagine learning like a continent of countries. And at the center of this continent, put something your child loves. Now, in this case, I put piano. Let's say you have a child who loves to play the piano. You could look at every subject of school through the lens of piano. For history, you can look at the history of the instrument, biographies of composers, genres of music, origin of the instrument. You could look at math, composition, time signature, transposing, chord structure, number of pedals and keys. You could look at science, vibration, sound, the physics of the pedals and the keys, how Beethoven composed while he was deaf. You could look at literature, musical notation, reading music, sheet music. You can look at films and novels like Amadeus and the piano. You can understand styles of music, geography, sociology. You get the idea. You can do the same thing with video games. You can look at design, the history, how the computer works. What is a pixel? Who are the designers? What is the game design theory that works to make a level interesting enough to keep trying, hard enough that you want to win and be satisfied, not so hard that you get frustrated and quit? What is the science behind a computer game? What is the art behind it? What is the storyboard behind it? In other words, all of the things your kids love have the school subjects already embedded inside of them. What we want to learn to do is to see learning differently and then stage the home to support that difference. And I'm going to help us do that now. One of the first ways to do it is to foster curiosity. So in this case, there are two kinds of curiosity that drive learning. There's your child's, and here is Katrin, thoroughly, happily enjoying sewing. She became fascinated with sewing in second grade. We taught her how to quilt. She took a sewing class. It led her to being interested in sewing clothing. She started watching America's Next Top Model, got interested in fashion. One year in junior high, we just ordered all the fashion magazines for her school curriculum. We did composition, vocabulary, spelling, all from Elle, W, Glamour, Vogue. That led her to the history of fashion, which led her into the history of females. Like, where are all the women in history? She was reading American Girl books and starting to ask that question. By the time she was in high school, she had her own fashion blog, and she studied American history through the letters written by ordinary and famous American women. And we built an entire program around the role of women in history. That's sort of the long timeline to give you a sense of how supporting a curiosity builds out into all the subjects. Meanwhile, my curiosity fostered a direction for one of my kids. I was studying theology as a master's student and got very interested in the social justice part of American history. And one of my sons got interested in all of the documentaries we watched together. And today he's a human rights lawyer. So foster all kinds of curiosity in your home. You never know where it will lead with your kids. Have big, juicy conversations outside the homeschool hours. On the left is my son, Jacob. He's the lawyer. The middle is my daughter, Johanna, and the other is my daughter, Katrin, both of whom are studying to be therapists, as a matter of fact. Chat with your kids about everything. More learning happens at the dinner table than the breakfast table. When you have relaxed conversations about any topic without any objective, you are helping your children build a vocabulary and learn what questions to ask, what they should be interested in. Another way to support your kids is to do something I call collaboration. Collaborate with your kids' dreams. Now, this is Jacob, who I just mentioned to you before. When he was a kid, he wanted to be an astronaut. So his goal was to go to space camp in Huntsville, Alabama. The only problem was it was $850 to go, and we did not have that kind of money. My husband, Jacob's father, suggested that Jacob start a cookie business in our neighborhood. They went door to door asking for orders, and I thought, no way will this last. He'll get a few orders one week and it'll be over. That cookie business lasted 8 years. He ran it for 4 years. Katrin picked it up and ran it for 4 more. One family spent over $3,000 on cookies in that time. Jacob earned all the money he needed for space camp. He went to space camp, came home and decided he didn't want to be an astronaut. By the time he was in college, he had become interested in human rights. And instead, what he learned as that cookie entrepreneur is that he could always raise the money he needed to see his dreams come true. To this day, Jacob has raised something like $300,000 or more in scholarship money. He went to Columbia Law School on a full ride. He has worked at the UN. He's worked for nonprofits. He was a Luce Scholar, all because early on, we took him seriously. Now, just to be clear, I have 5 kids. 4 of them did not learn this lesson. This is not what they chose to do, but one of them did. And we have dreams that all of them have pursued, that we've collaborated with, that have led to good things. Here's an example of one of those stories. Jim Collins, the famous business educator, said that he likes to challenge his companies to have big, hairy, audacious goals, a BHAG. And when I first heard that language, I thought, oh, I can use that with my kids. So I went to Johanna and I said, if you had all the time in the world and we had all the money in the world, what would you want to do right now? She was in junior high, and she said, I would like to have a Pemberley ball like they have in Jane Austen. And I thought, oh no, how in the world are we going to pull that off? But I provided the thing that mothers and fathers can provide to their kids. There are 3 things we can do that they can't do as easily. We can pay money or strategize a way to pay for it, whether it's a cookie business, or in this case, we use some bartering. We can do research. So I went online and I found a vintage dance company in Cincinnati, and then we can drive them there because they can't drive. And because we couldn't afford the lessons, $8 a week was too much for us at the time. We just went ahead. Oops, sorry about that. I think we have somebody who wants to be admitted to the waiting room, from the waiting room, by the way. Let me come back here. Sorry, I'm going the wrong way now because I tried to let someone in and I didn't need to do that. Okay, sorry. Here we go. I'm sorry, I got distracted. We went ahead and bartered with this organization. We delivered flyers, I guess it was, all around the neighborhood every week to cover the cost. And Johanna and Noah were in an adult vintage dance company for a year. And at the end of the year, they had a big ball, and Johanna got to wear a period accurate gown that one of the women in the company gave to her. So her big dream came true because of a little effort of mine and the magic of taking advantage of opportunities in our community. So don't always assume that if they tell you, well, I want to do this, you have to figure out how to launch rockets from your backyard. Get involved with the community. We went and did Shakespeare with our local Shakespeare company. We went to our observatory and learned how to use telescopes. Take advantage of your community. You want to value relaxed alertness. Now, my kids love video games, and I'm sure yours do too. But I have a son who also really loved chess. And he was interested in chess from a very young age and spent hours reading about opens and playing it as a small child. And then in high school, joined the chess club and eventually became first board, which means the #1 chess player in his school. And so, went on all these tournaments. And I did not miss a single tournament. There were no other parents there except one dad. So it was me and this one dude watching silent chess. By the way, boring. Nobody talks. And they take 2 minutes between every move. It's not lacrosse or hockey, okay? It's dull. But I was so steeped in pride. I mean, are you admiring me right now, by the way? Are you thinking, wow, how cool that her son likes chess? But you know what? He liked video games just as much. And one day in high school, he waved me over to watch him play. And I tried to dismiss him. I had never taken the time to watch him play. And he said, Mom, I need you to come now. I am playing on an international team and we're being broadcast in South Korea right now. We're in the top 10 teams in the world. And I realized I did not value the skill he was building in video games. He was contributing the same tireless learning to video games that he had to chess. Today, that son, the redhead in this photo, is an IT specialist. All of those hours he spent thinking through these complicated problem-solving strategies for both online games and chess have provided the foundation for his career. How about that? So when we're looking at our kids, it's easy to overvalue the chess, the prestige subjects, violin, opera, and forget that you can still learn playing electric guitar or singing pop songs or playing video games. Here's what Renata and Michael Kane say about relaxed alertness. They are brain researchers. This state exists in a learner who feels competent and confident and is interested or intrinsically motivated. The best context to facilitate relaxed alertness is relationship, relationship, relationship. The last way that you can facilitate a great learning environment, whether your kids are at home or in school, is to have learning parties. And of course, I'm famous for Poetry Tea Time, where you eat great snacks, drink tea, and read poems aloud. That is the whole agenda. You don't have to analyze, you don't have to write any, you don't have to get them to memorize the name of the poem or the name of the poet. You're just enjoying poetry. we want to give a high five to this concept of hygge, comfort, light, coziness. The Danes are famous for it. It enriches the learning experience. If you added candles and cookies to math homework, your kids would be more likely to do it. And in Poetry Tea Time, we have all of those properties: light, color, whimsy, intimacy, coziness, connection, and nourishment. But I did not stop there. I was interested in something we called Party School. This is basically, instead of doing a field trip, we would have a party. So you can see over on the left, I lived in California. We did a gold rush party where they literally built their own sluice to pan for gold. We had a medieval party where we dressed up and we acted out a medieval feast. My daughter and her best friend had a Japanese tea party where they made their own cherry blossom flowers and food and ate it out under a tree. Parties consolidate all the information. Kids are body centered. They like experiences. So think about the ways that you can make the environment for learning a little more party-like once in a while. And lastly, go places. You know, get out of the house and into the world. You could visit Italy, we did, but you could also just go to a local art museum or get out in the snow, no matter what the weather is like. Give your kids an opportunity to encounter directly the things you want them to learn. Reading only takes them so far. It is not nearly rich enough. They need up close and personal in order to really have a meaningful impact on their bodies and their minds. In other words, bring education home. Connect interests and passions to academics. Follow inspiration. She is not a lengthy visitor, so when she shows up, take advantage. Foster curiosity. Value tireless learning in any area that it shows up. And finally, expose your kids to the big, wide world. Whew. If you are new to Brave Writer, we give you a taste of how that looks with writing in our 7-day writing blitz, which is completely free. It's just 7 days of whimsy and fun around writing. It will blow your kids' doors off. The number one day one, is graffiti, fair warning, helping them write on non-traditional surfaces with non-traditional implements. And it just gets more crazy and interesting from there. Go to bravewriter.com and you can download it for free. And then, of course, you all have my book already, I've heard, but I have a free companion guide that you can download at the book's website, thebravelearner.com. If you go there, it is a digital file and it corresponds to each chapter with places to take notes. You can even do your own continent of learning. We have a template that you can print and use over and over again. That's just our gift to you for having the book. So please be sure to do that. And then finally, if you are a social media person, I hope you'll come follow me. I am on Instagram, quite active, Julie Brave Writer. We also have a Poetry Tea Time Instagram, and we are on Facebook. The top link is our store, store.bravewriter.com, where you will find all of our materials. So I am going to stop sharing and come back. Thank you so much for listening to that lecture. I think it went a little long only because we got a little bit of a later start, but I am more than happy to stick around and answer questions. So now I can see the comments, and if someone wants to come on and ask me the questions, I'm happy to do whatever you need.
Thank you so much, Julie. I think we have the questions getting over to Christine for her to read them out to you.
Great.
We have a lot of good ones in there.
Awesome.
Yeah, it looks like a lot of good ones. We have a mother here was reading one. It was rather lengthy, but she was asking about working. She is a she works at home,
Okay.
and where did it go? I know. I was looking at all of them here.
I can look in the
She
chat.
said, we are thriving at home since we had a COVID awakening. My 5-year-old loves projects, even some core learning now that he approaches 6. So we love it. But how do we keep going if we are having financial problems? I am self employed and my business does not get enough focus to keep thriving. This is not a side project, but a need. I'm exhausted when my partner uh, and I also is exhausted. I'm pregnant and I'm also exhausted. So how do we work? When can we work?
I mean, that is a true challenge. And
It is.
and I will tell you, just so that you know, we were broke and self-employed back when I was raising my 5 kids, pregnant and nursing constantly for 12 years, right? There was a year we lived in Southern California where we made $29,000 the whole year. I look back now and I think, gosh, good thing there were no cell phones yet because we couldn't have afforded one. So I definitely feel you. It is going to take some creativity on your part. And one of the things that I would really urge you to consider is being in a community where you can do some swapping. I had a mother's helper come in one afternoon a week where I could work for the afternoon. And she was like a 12-year-old girl who played with my kids downstairs. So if there was a real need, I could be called on. My work was somewhat asynchronous, so I was able to work weekends or evenings. But I really encourage you to draw on your community. You cannot do it alone. I also had a good friend, I mentioned her in this book, Dottie Christensen, and we would sometimes take the other person's kids for a day and we would homeschool 2 families at once to give the other person a day off. So be creative. Do not assume that school has to happen between 8 and 5 every day. I did some lessons with one of my kids in the evenings because he was too distracted during the daytime. But involve your community. You won't be able to do it alone. You will need support.
Very good. Very good advice. Here's a question, Julie. My 7-year-old daughter can do math problems that are story problems that she doesn't even really know are math. She could do them all day long, super fast, but she's never memorized her basic math facts. So if I ask her what's 9 plus 8, it takes her forever to answer correctly. Do I need to spend time getting her to memorize these basic math facts, or is it enough that she can do math in the real world?
I would say this. I think it's somewhere in between those two. Just memorizing them might be tedious for her, but you can be talking through the math more consciously. You know how when you have a little kid, you narrate things all the time. I'm getting the peas on the spoon. Open your mouth. They're going to go in. Okay, now chew. We do that really naturally when our kids are little. And then at about school age, we start going quiet. We expect kids to figure it out or we're helping them too much. But you could do it differently. You could be in the kitchen counting cups of flour and adding them and saying the words. You know, when I add 1, 2, 3 spoons to 1, 2, 3 spoons, let me count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 3 plus 3 is 6. You can start doing that. And you could do that right now with 9 plus 8 with Lego. You could do it with clothing from her American doll trousseau. You can do it with jelly beans. The point is, make it as tangible as possible. And you might even say something to her like, you know what's interesting? You know math so well that when I tell a story, it's like it comes to you instantly. What's a story we could make up about 9 plus 8 that's going to make it stick? And start thinking about, well, what 9 things is she going to add to what other 8 things? And what would that become? What would the 9 things do to the 8 things? What are they when they become a 17th thing? I think that's what you're really looking for, is a way to engage the whole person rather than just one or the other. Because she doesn't need them, but that's a way to do it.
That is awesome. Yeah, make it a reality and practical. Here's another question, Julie. I understand using a child's interests to access a continent of learning, but I'm wondering if Julie can speak to how parents can harness their own strengths in home education. I sometimes worry that the magic I want so much is based on someone else's reality and is therefore ultimately unsustainable.
You absolutely have to take your own personality into account. One of the things I occasionally get accused of is that I'm all magic and, too relaxed. And I meet these type A parents who are like, I really need a schedule. I really need a checklist. And I always say this to them, just change what's on the list. Be fully yourself. So if your checklist right now is normally gets 3 pages of math done, does 6 spelling words, gets the bed made by 9 in the morning, maybe just for a week, try a checklist that says things like made eye contact, gave 2 hugs, lit a candle for copy work, made muffins in time for the math lesson. Like, change the list, give yourself the credit, do it in a disciplined way. And if you're worried about quote unquote magic, I was not the creative. Dottie, my friend, was the creative. What I was good at was copycatting and learning from other people. When it came to candles, I ended up just getting tea lights for all my kids, and we just got them out for copy work. That was as fancy as it ever got. Poetry tea time in our house was not fancy. I had a workman type teapot. It was a Brown Betty, and we used mugs, and we pulled out our placemats that I had sewn back when I had time, right? Like that. So try not to set a super high bar. What you're looking for is what helps your kids to feel like this is a little bit more special than just mom dragging us through her schedule and checklist. That's all you're looking for. It might just be rubbing their shoulders. It might be giving a high five. It might be just coming up with your own every morning greeting that you do with your kids, and you modify it a little bit each week. Something that reminds them that there is a surprise or a mystery or a risk or an adventure, because that's what keeps them motivated. You don't need a lot of it, but you do need a little.
Awesome. Thank you, Julie. That was wonderful. Okay, so Joyce is asking this regarding poetry tea time. Sometimes I see photos of literature books rather than poetry books. Does it matter?
Nope. In fact, I know families who do math tea time. That's when they do their math. When I first thought of poetry tea time, it was because a woman was doing geography tea time. And I was like, well, I don't want to do geography. I want to do poetry. But here's one of the reasons poetry tea time is so popular. Poetry is a prestige subject, just like violin and chess, right? So when I say, geography tea time, doesn't hold anyone's attention. But when I said poetry tea time, everyone's like, oh yes, I want my children to love poetry. So it's a trick. It gets you into a mode where you start to understand that children can learn without pressure, without evaluation, with immersion, paired with good food and delicious tea or apple juice or hot chocolate or whatever you give them. So no, the first poetry tea time I did was actually Shakespeare, Leon Garfield. And once I saw that work, I'm like, okay, we're doing poetry. And it is still a thing. My kids as adults still do it. Whenever they come home, we always have a tea time. That's how it is. So yeah.
Building those traditions and memories and so forth.
Yes.
Well, now Ryan has a question for you. Get this one.
Okay.
What was the name of the online community that Julie has? Brave Learning something.
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. I didn't even mention it in the PowerPoint. Our community is called Brave Learner Home. So it's built from the title Brave Learner, but then we call it a home because, we're all about the home, as you just learned. And inside that community, we have monthly webinars, either with me or an invited guest. For instance, the guy who wrote The Self-Driven Child, he has a new book out and we're having him come in November. We've had people who address parenting issues, self-care issues, all the school subjects. And then, of course, I've done many of them. And there's a whole 7-year archive of webinars to look at, in addition to rolling out new ones every month. Inside that same community, we also have a continent of learning area that we call the One Thing Challenge. We focus on one thing like Shakespeare or bees or spiders or apples. And then we take you through these different levels of challenge that include all the school subjects. So we're basically showing you how to teach everything through anything. And that's got 7 years worth, all in various categories. And then there is a thriving discussion board where we have 6 paid, trained coaches who represent like 125 years worth of home education or some ridiculous number of years. And we come in and help you with everything from divorce and homeschooling to what to do with a reluctant, writer at 6 years old or a kid who isn't reading at 12. anything that you can throw at us. We've seen it, and we support you, and we help you get the kind of coaching you need. So every month that exists for you. And the way to get it is to go to, well, I'll put it in the chat, bravewriter.com/special-offer to learn more, because you can join for free for a lifetime when you invest in one of our classes or our Brave Writer products. So we would love to have you. There are almost 10,000 members in there. It's a great community.
Okay.
Oh, whoops, that was supposed to go to the whole group and it went to a direct message. Let me try again, because I'd like you to have that link. Here we go. Sorry about that. There you go. Anything else?
Okay, so I am trying to decipher the next question. Kristen mentions that her main problem right now is her toddler, who is a tornado. And
Oh,
I have homeschooled with teenagers and toddlers myself, so I'm sure you can speak to something like that.
oh goodness. So toddlers, it's just waiting them out. They will mature. Do not feel guilty about parking them in front of Mary Poppins. Try to do the work that you need to do with kids who need your attention, either on the weekends, during nap time, when your partner is home. Toddlers are tornadoes. It's very difficult to contain them, but it's also just a developmental stage for them. So you do whatever you can, right? You let them, give them the lower section of the wall in their bedroom to write on. Like, you can paint over it. Give them what they need to be the tornado they are, and then do the best you can to modify with the other kids. I found that sometimes I would even have like an older child play with a toddler while I worked with the other older child, and then they'd swap, and that older child would play with the toddler while I worked with the other kid, right? So it's a work in progress. You're going to constantly have that going on during that one season. It feels long, but it's shorter than you think.
No, that's true. That's very true. They do grow up fast. Well, Bethany has added here, I love the idea of centering all their subjects around an area of interest. Is there an optimal age to begin this? My girls are 6, 8, and 9 and have quite different interests. We do a lot of subjects together now. Not all 3 are able to work independently yet. Doing all the subjects with all 3 separately seems daunting time-wise. Any recommendations or advice?
Yes, I do have some. So first of all, good for you, keeping them together as much as possible. You do not have to do everybody's BHAG at the same time. I had 5 kids. I rotated. We never had more than 2 kids in sports at a time. We would give attention to one child's aspiration and interest and then another's. But also, they can pursue their interests if you let them. They don't always need you. It's sometimes we are weird about it. So a kid wants to sew and we're like, oh, but should she sew for 4 hours? Yeah, let her sew for 4 hours while you're doing math with the other kid that really needs it. Like, start to change how you think about school. The hours are less important. It's more a matter of this undulating interest combined with some of those core subjects. Like, my kids always had some kind of a math program going on. I didn't just teach math through piano, but piano made math more meaningful. When we got to fractions, we could go to the piano and look at chord structure and look at steps and half steps and whole notes and quarter notes and 16th notes. And suddenly the fractions in the math book made more literal sense to the child who played piano. That's more what I'm talking about. And honestly, it's daunting to homeschool a group of kids when you think in terms of making incremental progress in all 6 subjects every day of the year. You don't have to do that. You can do crash courses, 6 weeks, where all you do is focus on history and nothing else, and then that's it for the year. You can decide that history is the same for all your kids and you do it 2 days a week. You can do history in a co-op setting. I had 5 families we co-opted with, and we did 10 learning parties a year. Each family was responsible for 2, and we just did 1 a month. And that was our whole history program for the whole year. So be willing to break out of this idea that everything has to be done at a kitchen table. That will really help you.
Yeah, I agree on that. And I'm sure everyone else can see what you're talking about. It makes a lot of sense. Shayla has come to us with this question now, Julie. She says, I homeschool my oldest and my youngest is preschool age. My preschooler has fallen in love with human anatomy books.
I love it.
She gets so excited to go through them and learn. I realize she is in preschool, but what can I do to continue that passion she's showing for human anatomy?
Exactly what you're doing. Head, shoulders, knees, and toes. Read the books, name everything, and just go ahead and increase the names. She might love being able to say the word epidermis. You know, I remember I broke my elbow when I was in 7th grade, much older, obviously, but my doctor told me it was a probable fracture at the humeral condyle at the epiphyseal plate. And I was so impressed with this long, crazy set of words. I still remember it, and I'm turning 60 this year. And anyone who asked me what happened to my arm, I would tell them that. You can maximize your kids' pride, their sort of energy to be smart and silly by continually giving them more until they don't want it anymore. You can do that. So that's what I would do.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful. Now, Betsy has, I think, a very good question about technology. What is your advice on technology? Do you have an age recommendation for tablets, etc.? Thanks.
Oh, you're welcome. This is literally the question we get all the time. What about video games? What about screens? What about tech? So I do think it's worth it to pay attention to the guidance of like the American Academy of Pediatrics about screens with babies and toddlers. I think there is a lot of wisdom there, and it's worth paying attention to that science. But when we're talking about older children who are out of that early window, and we're talking about gaming, one of the resources that I really love is Ash Brandon on Instagram. And this has to go to everybody. I keep not having it on everyone. I'm going to write that again, at ash.brandon. And they are an expert on video gaming and education. They speak at conferences and have written about it and have done a lot of investigative research. So I've been able to benefit from Ash's work, and that's been part of the work I've done. But here's the overarching philosophy. There's nothing wrong with having some regulations around anything. You regulate what your kids eat, whether or not they are in a sport, whether or not they go to a religious service. Like, you regulate a lot of their lives, but you do it without wringing your hands and making them feel bad about wanting to do those things. Where it becomes a problem with video games is when you treat the video games like they're dangerous, like they're bad for your kids, and you're always hovering with the desire to shut it down. If you can have gaming time, and they know that it's coming at a certain time every day, and it's long enough to get into the game and actually do something, 15-minute and half-hour sessions are worthless for kids. They need at least an hour at a time, if not more. They can talk with you and tell you how much time they need. And you can decide, okay, that's a good amount. We're going to do that every day, or we're going to do that on weekends, or we're going to do that every other day. But your goal is to see the value in the tech. That's your job as a parent. And the best way to do that is sit next to them and watch them play, and you will start to get it. You would never feel bad if they told you they wanted to play a bunch of board games. In fact, you'd let them do it. It's because it's out on the table, visible to you, and you think, oh, well, that's really beautiful and wholesome. Because it's behind a screen, you get nervous because you're not watching it. So go watch it and start to appreciate what they're doing.
Mm-hmm. And Julie, we still have quite a few people that are with us, but some people have had to move on for their evening routine. But I have one more question from Ryan, and this is very important because I know there are some other parents who want to know. This is so great. Julie's philosophies ring so true for me, but I'm struggling with the idea that my children might eventually want to go to high school, etc. I want to leave all options open for them. So how to homeschool in a way that feels right for us also gives them the foundations they'll need to join public school later if they choose. Really appreciate your session, Julie.
Oh, you're welcome. And let me just tell you, so my oldest son, he did a few classes in high school and then quit because he didn't like it. My daughter, she did 3 years, and each year did one more class. So she started with one class, then two, and I think she ended with 4 classes. Jacob did 3 years of public high school. Liam did 3 years of public high school, and Katrin did 4 years of public high school. So we had that exact transition. And here's what you need to know. You do not have to treat home like school to prepare them for school. You do not. And any place that they are quote unquote behind, they will have learned how to teach themselves things. So they will either catch up, or you will be shocked, they will be way ahead. I remember when Jacob started school, I put him in a regular English class, and a week in, the teacher called me and said, "Why isn't he in honors English?" And I said, "Well, because he's not as good a writer as his brother and sister." And the teacher said, "He's the best writer in my class." I had no idea what the writing levels were in high school. My fourth child did not love high school, and we made a deal that he would just pass because he wanted to just go to this very Socratic method college that didn't require grades. So that's what we did. And then my youngest daughter, she was not up to speed on math, and within a semester, she was getting A's. Why am I telling you that? And this is anecdotal, but I have so many stories just like this. We do not want to sacrifice the opportunities of home while they're with us because we're afraid someday they'll go to school. They can catch up. School is not that difficult. It just isn't. And if they are getting this rich and varied diet and you're keeping them reading and writing and doing math, they can transition in, no problem. Thousands and thousands, millions probably have done that.
Yeah, that's very true. You're teaching them to learn and to love learning.
That's right. That's it.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. The questions are going to be published on our Johnson County Library's Brave Learner Facebook group. And Thomas put that into the chat if you want to access that. Ryan says, "Thank you for re-energizing me." And I know that that's probably how your presentation this evening, how it has affected each one of us who homeschool and continue to homeschool, regardless of the age group.
I love hearing that.
Thomas is also going to include in our chat the feedback link so that you can give us some feedback. We appreciate a few minutes of your time to just fill that out. We're also going to place the links to our homeschoolers and educator web pages in the chat. We do have a page on Johnson County Library website that is specifically .org Kids Homeschoolers. We have really focused lately, especially with COVID, on how we can support learners, and that includes the homeschoolers in our area, in our communities. We're also going to include our Facebook page, the homeschool page, so you can join us if you haven't already. And we hope that you favor these links and frequent them often for updates and resources and information. And with that said, I just want to say thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks, everyone.
We hope you'll stay engaged with the conversation through our Facebook page. And thank you for filling out that feedback for us, because someone like Julie is who we want to present for our communities who homeschool, especially so that you can stay encouraged and we raise those learners who love learning. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.